There are moments that change lives forever. A mistake, a broken object, a few careless words. But sometimes those moments become the spark that burns down an empire, not because of what happens, but because of what is revealed. For 3 years, Victoria James worked quietly inside the Hartwell Mansion. She cleaned floors, prepared rooms, served guests, and remained invisible. To the billionaire family she worked for, she was just another maid, a woman whose name hardly mattered. But on a rainy afternoon, a single mistake would shatter a secret buried for 25 years. A secret powerful enough to destroy an empire and expose a truth that nobody inside the Hartwell family wanted the world to know. Because Victoria James was not who she appeared to be, and neither was the billionaire who fired her. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. On a rainy afternoon, Richard Hartwell was hosting an important business gathering inside his mansion. Investors, executives, and influential guests filled the luxurious living room. Every detail had to be perfect. Richard demanded perfection from everyone around him, and especially from his staff. As Victoria carefully dusted one of the shelves, her elbow accidentally touched a crystal vase that had belonged to Richard's grandfather. The priceless vase wobbled, tilted, and crashed to the marble floor. The sound echoed through the room. Hundreds of crystal fragments scattered everywhere. The guests gasped. Silence followed. Then Richard exploded with anger. Years of stress, pressure, and frustration suddenly poured out. He humiliated Victoria in front of everyone, called her careless, called her incompetent, and without giving her a chance to explain, he fired her on the spot. 3 years of loyalty ended in less than 30 seconds. Security guards were called. Victoria quietly gathered her things. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She simply walked toward the front door. But before leaving, she stopped, slowly turned around, and looked directly at Richard's mother, Eleanor Hartwell. Then she said something that instantly changed everything. She said, "Before I leave, ask your mother what happened at St. Mary's Hospital 25 years ago." The room froze. Nobody understood what she meant, but Eleanor did. The color vanished from her face. Her hands began shaking, and the wine glass she was holding slipped from her fingers and shattered on the floor. For the first time in years, Eleanor Hartwell looked terrified. That night, Richard couldn't stop thinking about Victoria's words. He had seen fear in his mother's eyes. Not annoyance, not anger, fear. When he confronted Eleanor, she dismissed everything. She claimed Victoria was lying, trying to cause trouble, trying to get revenge after being fired. But Richard wasn't convinced. Something felt wrong. Meanwhile, Victoria returned to her small apartment across town. For years she had lived with questions she couldn't answer. Questions her late mother had taken to the grave. Before her death, her mother, Grace James, had given her a sealed envelope. She had made Victoria promise not to open it until the right time. For years Victoria resisted. But now she finally broke the seal. Inside was an old photograph. A photograph showing a nurse holding 2 newborn babies. Written on the back were chilling words. One child was chosen. The other was abandoned. There was also a letter. And inside that letter was a name Victoria knew very well. Richard Hartwell. Victoria's hands trembled. Because deep inside, she already suspected what the letter was about to reveal. The next morning she traveled across the city to meet Margaret Wilson, a retired nurse who had once worked with her mother. At first Margaret refused to talk. She claimed the past was too dangerous. But when Victoria showed her the photograph, the elderly woman's eyes filled with tears. After carrying the burden for decades, she finally told the truth. 25 years earlier, Eleanor Hartwell had given birth to twins, a boy and a girl. The Hartwell family celebrated the birth of a son, an heir, someone who would eventually inherit the family's wealth and business empire. But the daughter was seen as a problem, a complication, a child the family didn't want. Money changed hands, records disappeared, and one baby vanished from the hospital. That baby was Victoria. The world around her suddenly made sense. The struggles, the unanswered questions, the feeling that something had always been missing. She wasn't just a maid. She was a Hartwell. The daughter Eleanor had erased. The twin sister Richard never knew existed. But Victoria soon realized the story wasn't over. Margaret had more to say, and what came next was even more shocking. There were secrets hidden inside the original secret. Layers of lies built on top of lies. Back at the mansion, Richard secretly ordered a DNA test. He needed proof. He needed answers. But someone else learned about his investigation. His younger brother, Daniel Hartwell. Unlike Richard, Daniel had always been driven by ambition. He craved power, money, control, and Victoria's existence threatened everything. If she was truly part of the family, she could claim a share of the Hartwell fortune, a share Daniel desperately wanted for himself. So Daniel made a dangerous decision. Victoria had to disappear. One evening, Victoria received a message from someone claiming to possess additional hospital records. The records supposedly contained proof of everything. Desperate for answers, she agreed to meet. But the meeting was a trap. The moment she arrived, Daniel's men kidnapped her. They drove her to an abandoned warehouse far outside the city. When Daniel finally appeared, Victoria saw a side of him nobody else knew existed. A cold, ruthless, calculating man willing to do anything for power. Daniel told her she should have remained silent, that she should have stayed a maid, that some secrets were never meant to be uncovered. But Daniel underestimated her. Because before leaving for the meeting, Victoria had uploaded every document she possessed to a secure online server. If anything happened to her, the files would automatically be released. The truth was already beyond Daniel's control. While Victoria remained trapped inside the warehouse, Richard received the DNA results. His heart pounded as he opened the report. He expected confirmation that Victoria was his twin sister. Instead, he discovered something far more disturbing. The DNA confirmed Victoria was Eleanor's daughter, but it also revealed something impossible. Richard himself was not Eleanor's biological son. At first he believed there had been a mistake. He checked the report repeatedly. The result never changed. Richard Hartwell wasn't a Hartwell. His entire identity had been built on a lie. The man who had spent his life running the Hartwell empire wasn't even born into the family. When Richard confronted Eleanor, she finally broke down. For decades she had protected a secret so devastating she could barely speak about it. Years ago, complications during childbirth had thrown the family into panic. One of the babies had become critically ill. Fear and desperation consumed everyone involved. A terrible decision was made. A healthy newborn from another family was secretly switched. The real Hartwell son never survived. Richard had unknowingly spent his entire life living under another child's identity. Everything he believed about himself vanished in a single moment. The family name, the legacy, the inheritance, none of it truly belonged to him. Before Eleanor could process the consequences, Victoria's files were automatically released. The story exploded across the country. News stations covered the scandal nonstop. Authorities launched investigations. Former hospital employees came forward. Long-buried records resurfaced. The truth finally reached the public. Police tracked Daniel's location and stormed the warehouse. Victoria was rescued. Daniel was arrested. His plans collapsed overnight. Investigators soon uncovered evidence linking Eleanor to the original cover-up. She too was arrested. Within weeks, the powerful Hartwell family became the center of one of the biggest scandals in the country's history. The empire that had seemed untouchable was falling apart. Yet amid the chaos, something unexpected happened. Richard and Victoria began talking, not as employer and maid, not as billionaire and servant, but as two people whose lives had been stolen by the same lie. Richard apologized for the way he had treated her, for judging her without knowing the truth, for allowing wealth and status to blind him. Victoria listened quietly. She carried years of pain, years of rejection, years of struggle, but she also understood that Richard had been a victim too. He had never known the truth. He had never chosen any of this. Months later, Richard offered Victoria half of everything he owned. Half of the company, half of the fortune, half of the empire. Many people would have accepted immediately, but Victoria surprised everyone. She refused. Instead, she proposed something else. Together, they would create a foundation for abandoned children. Children who had been forgotten. Children who had been discarded simply because someone believed they were less important. Richard agreed, and together they transformed their painful history into hope for thousands of lives. At the grand opening ceremony, reporters gathered from across the country. Cameras flashed. Microphones filled the stage. And as Richard stood beside Victoria, he reflected on everything that had happened. Then he spoke words nobody expected. He said that the day he fired his maid was the day he found his family. The audience fell silent, because sometimes the people we overlook carry the truths we fear most. Sometimes the people we treat as insignificant are connected to us in ways we never imagine. And sometimes a broken vase isn't the beginning of a tragedy. It's the beginning of the truth that changes everything. And for Victoria James, the maid who was never supposed to exist, that truth finally gave her something money could never buy: a family, and a place where she truly belonged. If stories like this keep you thinking long after the end, hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life mysteries where one small moment changes everything.